All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Maureen McNerney. I'm the Development Director at Women's Public Leadership Network. We are a national organization dedicated to educating, organizing, and inspiring women to run for public office. And so we are really excited today to be joined by the co-founders of one of our state-based partners, the Pocketbook Project of Massachusetts. Part of our strategy is to invest in state-based organizations to be training and networking partners so that women, especially center and right-leaning women, feel that they have a connection to one another and to the resources they need to seek public office, whether elected, appointed, or to get more engaged civically. And so I'm happy to introduce Christina Bain and Jennifer Nastor, both from Massachusetts, the co-founders of the Pocketbook Project. So Christina Bain has decades of political experience, everything from being a legislative staffer to working on state, local, and federal campaigns. She has been a member of the Republican State Committee, a member of the Republican Town Committee, a member of the Board of Registrars of her town on the North Shore of Massachusetts. She's been dedicated and become an expert in engaging both women and youth in different types of coalition building, so she brings a ton of experience. Jennifer Nastor is an attorney, a mother of 3 girls as well, living in Boston, Massachusetts. She is a former chair of the Mass GOP, the state Republican Party. They did grow by a considerable amount during her tenure, as well as elect Scott Brown to the United States Senate. Additionally, she's a former candidate herself for Boston City Council. She was my candidate, and we were able to work together on that race. And she is the former CEO of Reflect Us. She has great experience engaging women specifically, and she's a political analyst for tons of local media in Boston, as well as a mentor to young women and to candidates. So really excited to have you both. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
And I wanted to hear from you guys sort of what is the story behind founding Pocketbook Project?
So, Christina, do you want me to start and then?
Sure.
Okay. So back in 2009, early 2009 to the end of 2011, I was the chair of the Massachusetts Republican Party, and Christina was on the state committee. In 2010, it was a statewide election and our elections for our House and our Senate here in Massachusetts. And in going around and trying to get more women to run for office, so Christina and I on the state committee had a little women's centered organization where we were looking for more women to run. So we had a committee up and running of some powerful women with lots of experience to go out and look for women to run for office. So we did find a couple. But what I was finding more and more, and especially after the 2010 election, where I had a ton of women working on both the Scott Brown campaign and Charlie Baker's first campaign for governor, was that women themselves were saying, I don't want to run for office. And we know that women need to be asked 9 to 10 times to run for office. But the answer that I was getting was really intriguing. And it was that no one knows I'm a Republican. So I was expecting the old stuff of I have kids and a family, which I was armed for because I also had kids, I had a family. And so I knew what my response was going to be. I never expected no one knows I'm a Republican. And so when I left being chair of the Mass GOP, Christina and I decided to take what we were doing on the party level and take it off into our own organization and create something for center-right women to feel comfortable running for office because there are other women like themselves, that the discussion could be different than it would be on the party level. Because what we saw was that the party was never going to have the apparatus to be able to do everything for all people, including for center-right women.
And we were also concerned that if we left it with the party, that it wouldn't continue on given change in chairmanship, change in executive committees and things like that. So we wanted to make sure that we had something lasting and with continuity. And in 2011, I started working for a nonprofit consulting on researching organizations to elect conservative center-right women around the country. And what I was learning is that we didn't really have anything like what was taking place around the country with, say, for example, the Excellence in Public Service series that happened in different states. New Hampshire has had one consistently for a while. So we didn't have anything like this specifically for center-right women in Massachusetts, or even more broadly, what we were thinking in New England. So we wanted to make sure that we had something lasting and something that would be a testament to all the great work. We were also doing some work on the national level with the Republican National Committee. They had again, some starts and stops of organizing women around getting more women to become elected. But again, it was based on the passion of the chairman, who was currently in the administration. And, it wasn't necessarily as lasting. So that was what started our organization.
Yeah, and it sounds like, so much of the focus, and it's a great priority of ours too at WPLN, is that your organization's resilient. It's made to withstand changes in administrations, whether, whatever party, gains seats one year versus loses them the next. We're creating a network of like-minded women that know that they've got one another for support, that can learn from each other and from your great experience as well. I want to talk a little bit about your name, because you guys did just rebrand, and we're very excited about it. But the name Pocketbook Project has so much meaning. So Jen, do you want to explain sort of what you guys were thinking?
Yeah, so I mean, we're an organization of women, and we're an organization of women who believe in fiscal responsibility. And so, what we know is most women are in charge of the purse strings in the home. They make those financial decisions for their families. They make those financial decisions for themselves. And so what we want to do is highlight that women are fiscally responsible pretty much regardless of your political persuasion. We're the ones that are paying attention to the in and the out of the income. And so that was kind of the beginning of where we decided to change our name and why we decided to change our name.
Yes. And it's also interesting, some statistics, say that, women make up a very high percentage of certain types of financial decisions in the household. They're the lead decision maker in the household. I was just participating this morning in the Concordia Summit, which is going on this week. It always happens around the time of the UN General Assembly, and they have a focus on globally participation of women in elective office. And they're talking about if women were allowed in terms of furthering their spending decisions and being allowed to fully contribute to the economy, it's something like 21% of GDP in countries would be from women, which is really extraordinary. So I think that this new name really captures, I think, the new era of what we want to achieve, with trying to get more women elected to office.
Definitely. So now, more broadly, what do you guys see as the state of women in Massachusetts and in New England? Because as you've mentioned, women from Connecticut, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, if you guys need resources and you're out there watching, please feel free to connect with our partner. The cause does not stop at the state borders. But what specific challenges or successes or trends do you see in a women's path to public life in your area?
So it's such a great question, because New England is really such a different area than most of the country. So, I mean, you can see what's going on in Maine with the US Senate race. Susan Collins, and there's a Democratic female who's challenging her. In Massachusetts, we have a slew of statewide female office holders. I think almost half of our congressional office holders are women. However, in our legislature and in our cities and towns, we suffer the same exact plight as the rest of the country does. So whether you're liberal Massachusetts or you're in more conservative Texas, you end up having around 22 to 25% of your legislature being female. So in Massachusetts, 25% of our legislature is female. And out of that, 10% are right of center women, are GOP women. And so it's interesting to see how on a statewide level, they're getting elected, but locally, maybe it's 20% where we have women elected at local offices. And so what we're looking to do is bump those numbers up because in order to then backfill all those positions of folks that are on the statewide level and in the federal level, we need to have a bench. And neither party right now do I see really has much of a bench. We don't have a ton of women that are running for offices this year.
And one of the challenges in Massachusetts is we have a full-time legislature. And in other states, like in our neighboring state, New Hampshire, which has one of the largest legislature in the country, they have part-time legislators. And so for women with families, childcare becomes an issue. It's a more of an obstacle to run, particularly for that type of seat. So we're trying to brainstorm and look at ways, and WPLN has been so supportive in having, sessions around this about how we can, help more women run given those challenges.
Yeah, and I think one question for both of you personally is, since your time in politics, what are the challenges you've seen that existed on day one and still exist today? What are some challenges that you think have improved or even potentially worsened? And Christine, I'll let you go first.
Sure. Well, one of the biggest things that I can speak to is technology. Having worked in this space for now over 2 decades, seeing the shift of using social media and email even. I mean, I remember when I was starting to be active in politics in college, you didn't have the email outreach that you have now. You didn't have some of the basics. I mean, when I started, this is dating me, but we had just text on the screen. There was no images. There was just text. So going from that to now what we have today, I think in a way it is an advantage, particularly for women, because it does allow women to do more and multitask. You can be online while you're picking your children up from school. You can, hopefully not while you're driving, but when you're, sitting in the car waiting for them to come out, you can be online, you can be doing an interview, you can be doing, different things. So it does allow you to multitask. The downside of technology is that you're also always on display. I think the critiques of women, the issues surrounding, everything from appearance. I mean, you're always on, quote unquote, because you're on this in this public space. So, but I would say overall, I think technology has been a wonderful thing because it allows, I think, more women to participate and have the ability to have families and work and run for office.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I started when I was 19 in helping on campaigns and getting signatures, and graduated from college and was put on local boards. And back in the day, I thought, well, I need to look like a man because I'm in this man's world. And any woman in politics at the time would just wear a pantsuit because that was more acceptable. So I think one change that I love seeing is that women can actually be women today. Which is wonderful, that we don't have to hide that. I mean, and you can see from Ruth Bader Ginsburg and from what she had gone through, and that was only in the 60s and early 70s, but, it was kind of taboo to be a woman who was getting married or having children or having a family. You kind of had to make a decision between which one you wanted. And that has changed over the years. Not quickly, but it's changing. And thankfully that started changing more in 2016 and 2018, where more moms were elected to office. So I think that that's really helpful. One of the things that, though, I see and I think has changed kind of negatively for women is that Democratic women seem to have some more hostility toward Republican women a lot of times, and don't seem to want to lean in and help out as much as Republican women will to Democratic women. And so, and maybe that's an overly broad generalization, but I think that it's incumbent upon all women who are in politics, especially when numbers are at 25%, until we're at 60%, we all kind of have to help each other, because we are the ones who collaborate better, who negotiate better. We're the ones who are able to network more and to listen. And if we are starting to be polarizing ourselves and not help our colleagues across the aisle to run for office and to get engaged, then we're doomed. And our message about how women collaborate and negotiate better and should be elected to office is going to be totally negated by that behavior. So that's something that I've seen, because I had lots of girlfriends on the other side of the aisle as we were growing up, as we were in grad school and law school and coming up together. And even though those relationships are still there, I feel like now more and more, it's really hard to make those networks and those relationships.
Yeah, definitely. It's something I'm experiencing, and something that I know that a lot of women in my generation are still experiencing too, and maybe haven't even been brought up in as much of the feel-good bipartisan time that you may have enjoyed a little bit more than even we do now. So,
and one of the other things I'll say too is, a challenge that we have as women is the president is viewed so poorly by Democratic women that as a Republican woman, we are consistently tied in with the president, no matter what we do, no matter what we say. It's not us, it's always about him. And as you know, Maureen, I went through this in my own race for nonpartisan Boston City Council. It kept coming up about, you're with the president, you're tied in with the president, you support the president. I was running to fix some potholes and streetlights. I didn't know that the president was on the table, but that's what's happening with Republican women now, right of center women, even in those nonpartisan races, because it's easy to find out what your party registration is. And so I appeal to everyone. We need to stop that, because we need to get more women elected regardless of where you are.
Yeah, and jumping off that, really, what drives you both as why we need more women in office? And Jen, you've alluded to how statistically we collaborate better. We're supposed to be good at forging those solutions. Our role and perspective in the household or in certain industries is underrepresented. So what are really the big motivating reasons why you'd like to see more women in office, beyond just, well, because it's our constitutional right to be represented?
Yeah, it's not just equity and equality, right? It's more than that. It's about, again, for years and years and years, and I'm not going to mention who those elected officials are currently, or folks who have run for office, but for years on panels and doing press and green rooms and parking lots, I have met women who are liberal Democrats who politically we don't agree on anything. But you know what we all have in common? We all are daughters. We all are probably sisters in one way or another. We're all nieces. We all, have pets, or we've had kids, or there's some common denominator. And that's the thing that brings women together in a very different way, because we don't have, and sorry for any men who are watching this, but we don't have the same egos. It's very different. We're more emotionally focused. And so if you can find another woman to talk to about a friendship, a girlfriend, someone who is ill, a family member, a happy moment on the soccer field, all of a sudden, the conversation totally shifts from being something that was nasty and contentious to, oh, that's right, you're a real person. And I think what all of us are craving is to see more real people who are elected to office, more people who are caring, more people who have a soul and a heart and you can appeal to. And that's how business is done. Business for years was conducted, for men on golf courses, right? Women do that while we're sitting and having lunch, or we're talking on our speaker phones, on our cars, doing pickups, or bringing our parents to doctors, or whatever it is. And so I think that that's kind of, for me, that was always the way that we network so much differently. And you can cut past the political BS once you have those relationships.
And I think too, for certain issues of policy, I think that's why it's important to have more women elected, because we bring a different set of skills to the table, and we're able to move different policy issues forward more strongly than maybe certain other areas. So I think in some of the issues that we would move forward are bipartisan issues. When you talk about paid family leave and you talk about childcare and you talk about some of these things, no, it doesn't matter whether you're right or left. It matters about, this is a good policy. And I think women really bring that to the table. And that's definitely why we need to elect more women.
Great. We have one question from the audience so far, more coming in. We've got, since the 1970s, the number of women serving in state legislators across the US has more than quintupled, but we still won't hit 50-50 in the next 90 years. So what can we do to really accelerate the rate of change to get more women into the process?
Sorry.
That's the answer.
Yes. Christina, do you want to start first?
Well, and I think I was just hearing this statistic again this morning at the summit that I've been participating in. It's going to take another 95 years, according to the World Economic Forum, globally, to reach gender parity in political representation. I mean, that's a startling fact. I think that, some of the things that I had just mentioned, I think, we have to figure out ways around, how do we help women with childcare and paid family leave and some of these things, some of ththese policy areas, in order to make sure, when you have a full-time legislature, like in Massachusetts, in order to make sure women can run and they already have these obstacles of fundraising in terms of, balancing all of these different things. And how do we make it better for them? And I think that that's something we're having these conversations now. I think, there are more conversations now on the national stage here in the United States on paid family leave. So I think this is really important. And that also impacts men, because I think that there is a conversation too. I hear from men often that who are, their wife just had a baby, and they're also up against something where they don't also have paternal leave. So this is something that's also crosses genders. And I think men are coming to the table on that issue, and they're supporting women, which is really great. So that would be my answer.
I echo that. Normalize men staying home with the kids, because it normalizes women being out there as well.
And right. I think and I'm hearing that right now especially during the lockdown, when new fathers were home and were going to go back into the workforce, and now they weren't. And so now they're home co-parenting with their spouse for the child. And it's really interesting to hear those conversations now, where people were in March and where they are now.
Yeah, totally. I think look, unfortunately, sadly, that's what the statistics are. I don't think that remote learning, I don't think that our school districts have done moms a big favor. And if you're a mom out there, you might want to consider running for office to change the situation that we're in right now, because when you don't have kids, like in Boston, kids were just starting school today, remotely, not even in person. And that really hurts your career. Speaking as a mom who has had kids home for 6 months, you take a hit on anything that you want to do. So I think that that's one part of it, and that should be motivating for women to want to run for office. Organizations like WPLN, like the Pocketbook Project, we're out there, and we need more of us, and we need more women who are doing work like this in various states to try to encourage women to run, and not just encourage them to run. But I think one of the failures in the past has been organizations want to encourage women to run for office, and that's it. They stop there, because the women themselves who have run the organizations were put there by men who didn't know how to actually excite and invigorate all those women who should be running for office. What we need are organizations like us, like WPLN, that are supporting those women and giving them the tools to run for office. So you know how to talk to the media, you know how to fundraise. Women innately are amazing fundraisers. We could fundraise for kids' schools, we could fundraise for charities, local hospitals, universities, whatever it is. But for some reason, when it comes to fundraising for ourselves, we all, curl into balls and suddenly have no idea how to do it. And unless you have someone who's holding you up and walking you next to you side by side and showing you, here's your campaign toolbox. Here is what you need to do from beginning to the end. How to start a campaign, how to fundraise, how to talk to the press. how to build up your network. You just don't know how to do it. And so I think that has been a real failure in the past. And so it's exciting to see WPLN out there and encouraging organizations like us to be able to do more of this work.
Yeah, and I also want to jump in with something I've noticed a lot in Massachusetts, which is that incumbents rarely go challenged. And even in a big year in Massachusetts where Democratic incumbents were being challenged, incumbents won. And so I think a big barrier that not just women, but any new faces and new voices face is this real institution of the people that are in elected office are not leaving until they choose to leave. And unfortunately, the women in Massachusetts tend to leave of their own volition a little bit earlier than the men that are in office do. So really, giving there's that much greater of a gap in resources and that much greater of a need to close that gap in resources so that women can jump into what they can expect to be very contested races.
Absolutely.
So another comment from the audience is, have you seen more women coming to you that are fired up to run, but shy about being the face of the campaign? And, Jen, it's funny because obviously you're not the most shy person in the world, but maybe you can speak to, there were definitely a ton of times you looked at me and said, I've been used to being hard on candidates, but now all of a sudden to be the candidate is pretty hard in of itself.
Yeah. I mean, I'm probably different than a lot of candidates out there where, I have pretty thick skin. Like I said, I've been doing this since I was 19 years old. I've been chair of Mass GOP. I had little babies. I was told I should stay at home barefoot and pregnant. And then when I got pregnant, I was told I should stay. I thought I had gone through everything. The images of me online are hysterical. My kids that are teenagers continuously find them just to make fun of me. Being a candidate is super different. And that's one thing I try to tell first-time candidates also is, and two things. One, as a first-time candidate, sometimes you don't make it and you should run again. But the other thing is, as a first-time candidate, no matter how many friends you have. I would do the self-reflection, and Maureen, you know this, I have friends that go back to when I was 8 years old. I can't be a terrible person. I get told all day long, I'm so bad. And then you realize, well, I have a lot of friends, at least the two of you, right? So it's, you end up in this position of even the most outgoing, gregarious, strong personality takes so many hits during the day that you need to make sure that you have a good support network of friends and family around that are just going to be there, that you could be like, I need to just to know that I'm a good person. But I think that it's in Massachusetts right now, I think unless you live in certain districts around the state, it is very difficult to not want to kind of hide that you're a Republican a little bit. Now, we have a very popular Republican governor in Charlie Baker, who has been doing an amazing job, but everyone gets tied into the president, and it's a presidential election year. So I think the candidates that are running, are female candidates that are running probably in more conservative, and I use conservative lightly, in Massachusetts, in those districts. And they can be a little bit more open into their political beliefs, but I don't see a ton of women who are racing out there to be the forward voice of the Republican Party right now.
I think too that there is the statistic that you have to be asked multiple times as a woman as opposed to a man, and even considering running. So we already have that against us because and as women, we think about, well, why not? Whereas men typically think of why yes. So this is, just how we are. So you have that, and then coupled with just the vitriol in politics. I also know women on the left side who have also questioned running because of just the time in politics right now, where it's just so vitriolic. But predominantly we do on the conservative. I would agree with Jen absolutely that it's harder to say that you're a conservative and a Republican in Massachusetts, hands down, as opposed to being up in front about being a Democrat and to the left. So, but I think right now is just a really interesting time, and I think that we are seeing both those phenomena of not only okay, why not, and then I'm also a conservative, and then I have to come out and I have to face my colleagues, and I have to face the workplace, and I have to face, my my PTA, and I just can't be perceived as a Republican or a conservative. I just can't have that because I'm worried about the backlash.
And, I want to add on to that too. We have a great congressional candidate in Massachusetts running, and there was a man who basically came out and was like, I'm going to run against you. And that to me, it's different than what you were talking about before, Maureen, where there are male incumbents who, when a female is challenging, it's already an uphill battle. But now we have Massachusetts Republicans, by the way, for anyone who's watching who's not in Massachusetts, we're like a little more than 10% of the electorate. So it's not a very big pool that we're talking about. So instead of, kind of clearing some paths and pushing along our women and fostering those relationships, there's a lot of hindering that and allowing other men to challenge women, Republican women who are running for office. And for me, one of the things I would say is if we're going to really be serious about encouraging women to run for office, and when they're a challenger, it's bad enough, we should look at that primary process a little bit and maybe try to say to the guy next time around, because I know as a woman, I was told next time around for like 20 years. So maybe it's our time to say that to the guy.
I can definitely relate to that too. And then thinking a little bit more about other ways that women can get involved. So if they never do take that step of being the face of the campaign, do you see a lot of women as operatives? I know I was a political operative, am a political operative in Massachusetts, and I don't see as many as I would like. And who I see are mostly on the younger end. So I guess I'm asking, how are women, and especially of that next generation ahead of me, are they engaged? How are they engaged? How can they get more engaged?
Absolutely. I think Jen and I have talked about how we do have to train our political operatives now differently. I think that we need a fresh crop of political operatives, particularly women. I have seen gains, particularly in the finance realm. I think that there are more Republican women finance directors than I've ever seen before, which I think is really exciting, which is interesting because you see that on the operative side, but then when it comes to asking for money as a candidate, it's a different type of ask. So when you turn into a candidate, it's different than when you're raising money for someone else as a woman. But I think we've seen tremendous stride in that, and I think that we should have more ways to train, particularly women up and coming, to be political operatives and in less traditional roles. I think that we're also seeing now more, I think, women in ops and in advanced type roles where traditionally I think you had seen more men, but I think we still need to work on that as well.
Yeah, and I definitely think we need more operatives. And that's one of the things that hopefully Christina and I, with our experience, can bring to the table for women who they are interested in politics, and they're interested in policy, and they're interested in campaigns, and they're interested in government. I mean, getting on boards and commissions when I was in my 20s was a phenomenal start to my political career. And I wanted to run for office, but I love being a strategist. I love being, in the world of being an advisor and being an operative. And that to me sometimes is much more fun than even being the candidate, because you can effectuate some serious changes on that end. And so encouraging women at all levels to get involved. And yes, we do have a large amount of women on the national level and the state level that are doing fundraising. But what we need are women who are in the advisory discussions. We need more women who are, doing the campaign manager work. We need more women who are doing the political work. And in order to get there, you need to seek out people like us that we have the networks, we know who the people are, we know who you talk to, we know the campaigns to go work on. Everyone needs to get some experience. You can't just jump into it. And sometimes it's about who's going to give you that experience. And if that person is going to be true to you, the staffer, and help you move on from there as well. So, I would love to see more female operatives, because I think that also makes women more interested in running for office when they know that they could grab a young woman or an older woman who has been on campaigns and understands what the life is like, to be able to work on their staff.
And I also want to give a shout out. I mean, I got my start. And I know, Jen, you did, with the Young Republicans. I got my start with the College Republicans. I mean, I really owe them my whole career, literally my whole career. If I had not gotten involved with College Republicans and started getting involved with my local campus chapter, and then taking on leadership roles, and then going on and being involved at the, on the national level, they connected me with all the different political leaders that, I hold as now friends and mentors. And that's something that, if you're on a college campus, most campuses have some kind of conservative student group. It may not be called College Republicans. Some are conservative student publications. Some are where you can write, about your ideas, or, it's some other form. But it's just an amazing organization that was able to give me the tools and the connections that I needed to have the career that I had today.
And if you're young, like Christina said, I started with the YRs, with the Young Republicans. But if you were young, the best way I found to meet people was working on campaigns, because it was generally other young people who, were running around all day, and your world is crazy, and you spend a Saturday canvassing, and you spend a Saturday getting signatures and talking to people. And then you go out for drinks, and you build up this camaraderie, which then you have lasting for years and years and years. So as a young person, it's awesome. As someone who's older, again, sometimes we all get stuck in ruts. I'm in my late 40s. I have a lot of friends who have been at home with their kids for years. Their kids are now teenagers. They don't need as much. They're kind of on their own. Joining a campaign, getting involved in the political process gives you, a sense of purpose, of something outside of your family, but it also allows you to meet new people that you never would have met before, but have the same political beliefs as you do, which also is really nice, especially in the super polarized world, to meet other people who are like-minded.
Yeah, and I want to say, you mentioned how small, around 10% of the registered voters in Massachusetts are actually Republican. And your group, as well as ours, are nonpartisan for a reason. And there are so many nonpartisan elected positions where the values of these women still might come through. They could be an unenrolled voter. They could do all these different things, be engaged. So, really, as you see, like building your own network that does for these women what the YRs and what the CRs did for each of you, sort of what are some of the key things that you want to build up between these women? Obviously, I always think making it fun, which you just mentioned, but come for the fun, like understand then how you're going to be like pulled into these worlds. But what are some other things that you're hoping to create as sort of the environment of Pocketbook Project?
Yeah, well, 56% of the electorate in Massachusetts are unenrolled voters. And so, when you split down along party lines and where those unenrolled voters go, we don't have independents. They're called unenrolled. They can vote in either election. And when you look at them, it's almost evenly split between Republican votes and Democratic votes. And so what's really fun about our organization is that we have not just Republicans, but we're open to all those unenrolled voters out there, all those unenrolled young women who are interested in campaigns. And because Christina and my network are so large, we have friends on both sides of the aisle. So we can help place you on a campaign on either side. And I do a lot of conversations with college kids. Christina and I have done a bunch of these panels together where they come up after and say, I'm a young Democrat, but I love what you said. I would love to stay in contact with you because I can't find anyone else who could help me. And be able to connect them then to our Democratic colleagues who can then help them and foster their careers. And so that's one of the most fun things I think about being in politics in Massachusetts and doing what we do, is that we're not stuck just with Republicans. We can help a broad, array of women of political stripes. And it's fun, it's exciting. And you do feel like, for me at least, this time of year, wake up in the morning and you smell the crispness in the air and you're like, it's campaign season. This is so fun. I know I can actually make some sort of change. And even if my candidate doesn't get elected, that's not the whole idea. The whole idea is that we got a message out there and gave an alternative to just the same old. And I think being able to do that and for people to have a different perspective and to hear a different message is really, really important and powerful.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things, Jen, you had mentioned is about connections and making connections. And I think one of the things that we forget, and you see this just, with anybody in the nature of today being so fast paced, is that we sometimes lose those connections. And I think what we want to have Pocketbook Project is making sure that women have the resources to keep those connections alive. And instilling that you should, even if you run and you lose, you run it, you want to keep that network going in case you run again, or if you do something else, you may never know where a connection can lead. And one of the things I learned early on is you have to really try and be nice and just keep up with those connections. Don't lose a connection, or you never know where a connection is going to lead. So I think it's really important that you keep with those connections. And I think that's what Jen and I want to do, is we want to create a way and resources for women to keep up those connections.
So I've got a couple more audience questions. One I want to sort of do as a rapid fire style. And it's an age-old question we get all the time, but what can our male counterparts, both in office and as a voter, as a donor, as anything, do to help support women? Jen, you're first.
So one, encourage a woman that you know to run for office. That's my first thing, is if you work with someone or you're on the soccer field with someone and she's the mom who is the team manager and she coordinates the carpools and, she knows everyone in town and she's likable, personable, encourage her to run and maybe step up. My fundraising chair, my finance chair, was a friend of mine who is a Democrat was my finance chair because of that friendship. And always super encouraging. So if you're a guy, you should encourage women that you know to run for office. That might be your wife, and that might just be a friend or, someone you've known forever. The other thing is, for our elected officials, I think what our male elected officials need to kind of stop doing or to start doing is to understand that even though that they have longstanding relationships with some of the guys, some of them are incumbents, some of them may be challengers, but mostly incumbents, that they need to put those relationships aside at some point and be accepting of the women who are coming up the ladder and need to run, because it's experience for the women who are out there who want to run for office. They need to keep their phone lines open. They need to keep their minds open. They need to keep their connections available. And not just get stuck in the mud with, oh, I've known this person forever and we have a relationship. So not that person's time just yet.
Absolutely. And I think more men will follow suit when they see other men encouraging other women. I think that creates a role model effect. And then it's a domino effect where you see this happening in multiples. So I think we do have a history, and I think Maureen, you had mentioned it about that, you have incumbents in Massachusetts who you see consistently at the spaghetti suppers and, obviously pre-lockdown, but, all these, local events, and you see the same old faces. And I think it's important for men to recognize there is new blood, there is new talent, and to encourage those new voices, as Jen said, in taking on a leadership role. And maybe it's not running for office initially. Maybe it's running, for a local position. Maybe it's running for a board and commission, or, just something, whatever it is, or some kind of an appointed role, encouraging and recommending a woman, something like that. And then other men will follow suit.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in and say, I think one thing for men, it's like, look to your left, look to your right. If you are in a room with no women in it at any point during the day, I mean, maybe over like cigars or something with your group, that's fine. But if you're in a professional setting where there's no women, you really should call that out. You as a man are still capable of calling that out. And then my second thing for men would be donate, because it works just as well whether their dollar came from a woman or a man, and statistically it's still more likely to come from a man. So we could really use you on that front as well.
Absolutely.
And then another sort of, I would say the question is, what is something I can say to a friend who runs the community groups, would be fabulous for public office, but she doesn't see herself as somebody in that. So how do you make that pitch to a woman who, as you said, Jen, like is the community leader, has all these connections, but maybe doesn't realize or see the connection between that and actually public service?
Christina, you want to start?
Sure. So I think, with something like that, you can do it just as good as well as someone else that you may be, voting for or electing. Why can't you do it? I mean, I know sometimes we sit in these rooms and, we're talking with other women, or we're talking with a mixed group, and we're complaining about, what's happening in the world. Well, you can actually do something about it. So if you have these ideas, your ideas are just as good as someone else's. Mm-hmm. And maybe you can actually do it better. So give yourself the chance. And I think that's what we have to allow ourselves as women, and to encourage other women to give ourselves the chance to make a difference. And I think sometimes we don't give ourselves that chance because we negate, we go to the negative. So I would say that you're already organizing the community groups. If you're in the community, you can do just the same thing at in a state level office, in a local office. And you can actually create systemic change and policy change at the same time.
Yeah,
really, it's no different. It's the same. It's all coalition organizing. It's community group, the PTA, it's all the same.
That's exactly what I would say, is that, the same leadership skills that it takes to be the CEO or an executive director of a organization is the same as it does to be a candidate. And if you can lead an organization, if you can bring people in, you have that grassroots organizing that you know how to do, that you can fundraise. If you're the head of the PTA, or if you are the Girl Scout cookie leader and you're able to coordinate all those kids and all those parents and all those sales, you should think about running for office. If you're the person who's out walking your dog and you stop and you can't get down the street without talking to every single neighbor on the street, or you're walking to go, living in Boston, this was kind of one of my things. I walk my dogs and I can't get down. I can't go walk them for 5 minutes. It takes me 55 minutes. So that at that point, maybe you should run for office, because maybe you can make a difference, because what we need are people who are embedded in their communities, people who understand what is actually necessary, what their neighbors are talking about. If it's trash collection, or if it's that people are passing that same intersection and not stopping at that stop sign, or if it's some big legislative priority where you're sick and tired of your taxes going up and you want to know where all that money is going, you should be running for office. And so it's telling your friend that, she has all of these skills and she would be great in that capacity, but also maybe getting some other friends together and saying, we're going to support you. We're going to be here to bring your family some dinners at night. We're going to be here to pick up your kids from school in the afternoon. I know you have dogs, you have vet appointments, someone's on your dogs. We're going to help you. We're going to get a dog walker for you, whatever it is. But women actually work on networks and their own networks, and they want to know that they have that support system there. And if their friends are actually there, even if it's to bring over a bottle of wine on a Saturday night because you're exhausted and can't go anywhere else, that woman needs to know that there's going to be that network there for her.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you both so much. We're going to wrap up, and sorry if there's any questions we didn't get to. I know we talked a lot about sort of the intersection of motherhood and running throughout this conversation, so I think we've touched on that. But where can we learn more about you, donate to Pocketbook Project, sign up for an upcoming training, sort of give us that real world connection to your organization?
So you can go to www.pocketbookproject.org, and then you can email us at team@pocketbookproject.org. And we'd love to have you contact us and sign up for our upcoming webinars and programs and get involved.
And if you're a young woman and you want to do an internship, or if you're an older woman and you want to do an internship, we're always looking for people to come and help us with our work.
Awesome. Well, please, anyone watching, give Pocketbook Project a follow on all of their social channels. Please, if you're not yet following Women's Public Leadership Network, because you tuned in just to see these two amazing women from Massachusetts, follow WPLN on our social. We're both nonprofit organizations, so we would love your support. And we hope that you stay up to date with programming from both of our orgs and what WPLN's ongoing Facebook Live series. So again, thank you so much, Christina and Jen, for being on and for sharing about your organization. And Jen, I know you've got to jump right on Boston Public Radio, so I'm going to let you guys go, but have a great rest of your day.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, WPLN. Thank you, Maureen.
Bye.